my name is Saskia. My pronouns are they, she. I am a speech and language therapist. I am from Cape Town, South Africa. Um, I have a speech therapy practice, and the main focus of my practice is gender affirming voice and communication therapy. So, helping people find their true voice if there's feelings of a disconnect between how they communicate and who they are. um, as well as also neurodiversity affirming voice and communication therapy. So that's also kind of about authentic communication and especially kind of reducing masking in communication and being able to communicate authentically as the true self. I also recently launched a international voice coaching service that is specifically focusing on gender affirming voice coaching to help just sort of fill the gap globally for gender affirming services, which I know there is a big need for.
So, how did you come to be working with gender affirming voice? Was that something that's more of a personal journey that you went through with finding an authentic voice for you, or did you take the route of speech therapy and then realize that there was something people were struggling with? Like, how did you come to that?
So, I mean, it's an interesting question because I think that it's hard to say almost what came first. It's almost like a chicken and the egg situation because my background has mainly been in hospital work. So I graduated in 2012 or 2011 and then started working in 2012. And I've mainly been based in hospitals, including for a couple of years I worked in the UK, in London for the NHS. So I worked in hospitals around London for a few years. And then I came back to South Africa in 2015 and I worked in a hospital for 5.5 years before leaving and then wanting to start my own practice. And I I guess like when I was starting my own practice, I'd been told by a colleague who works in private healthcare in Cape Town, who's a psychiatrist who is the main or is one of the main psychiatrists dealing with gender affirming care, that they really struggle. There's no one to refer to for gender affirming voice. So that was kind of like something that I had in my head. And then I was like, okay, let me fill this niche. It's always been really important to me to work with uh, communities and like marginalized communities or people that are not getting as much focus as they should be getting. So it made sense. And then I spent time preparing myself to work in this community and upskill myself. And through doing that, I just learned so much about myself. And, my vocabulary and my understanding of gender increased significantly. And then I started learning more about me and like I'm non-binary and I didn't fully know that until I started preparing myself to learn, sorry, started preparing myself to offer the service. So that kind of was a result of something. It wasn't the beginning of it, but it's sort of been like a feedback loop where the more I learn about this, the more I understand myself.
So it's like the work took you to your own personal journey as opposed to your personal journey taking you to the
Exactly.
work. That's
Yes, I feel like it's like kind of been both,
Mhm.
yeah, complementary.
And so, what are some of the challenges, or maybe unique, or maybe they're similar to cisgender people as well? But what are some of the challenges that you've been coming across that queer, non-binary, trans people have been dealing with in terms of their voice? What are some common issues that people seem to have?
So I would say it's a broad answer because I think it's very different for every person. There's common themes. Um, you know, One that I think I hear quite a lot is safety, unfortunately. So for a lot of people, uh, yeah, their concern is their safety. And if they're in a public bathroom or something, if they sound different to how people expect them to sound based on how they're presenting, that's a safety risk, and people have bad experiences. So a lot of time people come to me wanting to feel safer. Um, but then the other thing is also, people not feeling comfortable and not feeling kind of at home in their voice. So um, the voice, it's extremely flexible. Our voices are very flexible, but we don't intuitively know how to adjust them or to modify them to match ourselves better. And not everyone who is gender diverse or um, trans wants or needs my services. And lots of people are completely happy with their voices the way they are, but some people do experience dysphoria in relation to how they sound or their nonverbal communication style. And that's kind of who my service is for. It's for people who are feeling dysphoria related to how they communicate. And I don't necessarily, stick with the idea of the binaries in my therapy. Generally, the therapy or coaching, sorry, because internationally it's coaching that I offer. But generally, it falls under kind of masculinizing, feminizing, or neutralizing. But we don't have to stick under these kind of big umbrella areas. It's more about exploring and finding your voice that feels authentic and true to you. And there's different components to the voice, different elements that we can explore. And within each of those elements, they exist on spectrums. So finding where on that specific spectrum is kind of your happy point and how that interacts with a different spectrum. You can really create like a voice that's unique to the individual. And it's also not about finding a brand new voice or copying someone else's voice. It's about connecting with yourself and finding your true voice. So I think that there's, kind of, I guess, two main things. The one is when the voice doesn't align with who you are, and then the other one is sometimes safety. And sometimes someone has both. Sometimes someone just has one of these. But ideally, we'd live in a world, or one day we're going to live in a world where the safety component falls away, and also people don't have expectations of how someone should sound based on any other factors about them. In a perfect world.
Yeah, it's really interesting because for me, what resonates is feeling it in terms of embodiment and how I guess a trans experience, if somebody's trans masc wanting to sound more masculine to make it really binary in that way, that's more of like an extreme representation of, I guess, learning to come into an embodiment that's not been allowed, maybe. And I feel like,
Yeah, oh, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like there's, even for people who aren't necessarily trans masc or trans feminine, but somewhere in that spectrum, there's so many variations of that, and kind of
Absolutely.
understanding the situations where you don't feel safe, and so maybe your voice moves to a different part of your body, and
Mm.
that can obviously have such big consequences in terms of how you communicate with people, which then affects everything in your life, doesn't it? So
Mm. Yeah, and I think also something that is a big part of, why I think my the service that I offer is very relevant right now in the world that we live in. But maybe again, in like a perfect world, the service wouldn't be necessary because people would be free to, as they are small children and babies, and as they are growing and exploring who they are, they wouldn't be sort of forced into boxes. So that journey of self-discovery wouldn't be halted, as someone is forced to change the way that they are expressing or playing with their voice or their movement and their style. Um, that's kind of, I think, a big part of it. My journey, my therapeutic journey or coaching journey, kind of aims to reconnect you with like the small child that you once were, that could just express themselves and play and explore and figure out who they were. And if people could do that without any kind of direct or indirect being told that they shouldn't or that they should be a certain way, then very possibly no one would need my coaching or my therapy services. So maybe one day we'll be there.
would you say that's the same, kind of a similar thing with people who are neurodivergent, that it's been a kind of shutdown for vocal tics or anything like that, or how they express
Absolutely.
themselves?
Absolutely. I think it's kind of almost like a masking, and there's a big overlap actually between the neurodiversity affirming work that I do and the gender affirming work that I do. There's also, kind of a big overlap between the neurodiverse community and the gender diverse community. But even separate from that kind of existing overlap, it's ultimately about being authentic and connecting with your kind of true self and learning how to express that in a way that feels good and makes you feel more confident and more like yourself. So even though the one perspective might be kind of more from a gender component and the other one more from like a neurodiversity component, there's a lot of common ground. And often I'll see someone for kind of one, but it really kind of pulls on elements of the other. There's a lot of common ground. I'm like dealing with voice and communication and authenticity, but it often has like it has kind of bigger effects outside of that. It has kind of domino effects in other parts of people's lives as well, where like even though we're kind of mainly focusing on voice communication, but it's also, it's never just limited to that. It's not kind of this finite thing. With that comes so many other things like the way you breathe, for example, because the way you breathe is a huge part of your voice. It's the battery or the power system for your voice. But also when you start focusing on things like your breath, when you're taking like diaphragmatic deeper breaths, like breathing into your belly instead of like your shoulder or like your chest area, um you are basically telling you're telling yourself, your body, that you're kind of safe and you're okay. That sends systems to your nervous system, and it makes people feel calmer and more present. And things like posture, which is also very important when it comes to the voice and like a healthy voice. Like when you have a more kind of upright posture, you're giving yourself permission to take up space and to be kind of unapologetically yourself. And other people, and I always tell my clients, like, it's not about the other people. They're not my clients, but it's the fact that when you are giving off like, with the breath, for example, you are giving off kind of a more calmness. People respond more positively to you, which makes you feel more comfortable and more at ease, and it gives you permission to be yourself. And again, that in turn makes people respond more positively to you, and then it's just sort of a positive feedback loop. But also, yeah, sorry, I'm getting kind of focused on that one thing, but it's actually just so much broader, and it's also about how you speak to yourself and give yourself permission to try new things. And even if I'm looking at it through a communication or interactions lens, it's all relevant to lots of other parts of your life as well. So it kind of has a snowball effect in other parts of people's lives as well, which can be very affirming and very positive. And yeah, it's really a great, for me as a therapist or the coach, it's really great to kind of see someone through this journey and maybe focusing on one part of it and adjacent things, but I can see kind of the broader picture, and it's often a very positive picture.
Yeah,
that
it's
unfolds.
holistic care for people.
Yeah.
So you're doing a workshop for us soon called Finding Your Authentic Voice. And would you be able to just explain for us what to expect from that workshop, how it might help people? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've broken the workshop up into two parts. The first part is just kind of like a summary. It's breaking up the different parts of the voice journey. So, a lot of people know that maybe the service exists. Some people don't, but people often don't know what it involves. Mm-hmm. So I just want to give people a kind of an idea of what the various components of the voice are, how we can work with them, and what one can expect from the journey. It's, I think, a very kind of abstract idea. Most of us use our voice to communicate, or many people use their voice to communicate, but we don't know what we're doing when we are using our voice. So I like to kind of just break it up, make it kind of really tangible, have people understand what the journey involves and what the what the kind of the support that goes along with it is, because it can be a difficult journey. It can bring up a lot of other difficult feelings and dysphoria, and I try to support the client as much as I can throughout this, but ultimately also they are the expert on themselves. I'm not going to be telling them how they should sound. I'm just here to facilitate their exploring. um, and also, something that I also became aware of recently, because I would say probably about, depends on when exactly, but like often I would say my client base is probably about 40 to 50% people who are wanting to masculinize or kind of neutralize their voice. Um, and just through doing some research, I see that in many countries, including the UK, often the focus is on feminizing, which it has been historically for a long time as well. But because there is the assumption that testosterone takes care of the voice if someone wants to masculinize. And testosterone does affect pitch, but there's all these other components that I'll speak about more in my workshop that are not affected by testosterone. And also not everyone wants to take testosterone or can take testosterone. So I think it's just really helpful for people to kind of understand a bit more about the voice and also what the therapy journey or the coaching journey can do for you, because we don't know about this. And then the second part of the workshop is, it kind of pulls a bit on kind of my another part of the journey, which comes in when I do the gender affirming work, but also the neurodiversity affirming work, where it's just about being more aware of the thoughts that we have, and especially when those thoughts are not helpful for us or kind to us or realistic. And being able to notice that, become more aware of it, and categorize it, because you get different types of common unhelpful thinking styles. And when you can know what those kind of categories are, it's kind of helpful to be able to categorize it and then know how to replace it with something that is more helpful, more kind, and more realistic to yourself. Which again, like you can see how it's helpful for voice, but again, it has so much of a broader effect because I'm using it through the lens of voice and communication, but it's relevant to every part of our lives. So yeah, just a little breakdown of that, because I think we all need that, or most of us need to sometimes just be a little bit kinder to ourselves.
Yeah.
And just to also make people a bit more aware of what this journey involves, because it is more than just here is a generic voice for you.
Absolutely. And I think while this is particularly really important work for people who may be going through hormonal affirming care or anything like that, it feels like something that everybody could really benefit from because it, like you said, with it affecting your breathing and your posture and how you talk to yourself inside, like it can have such a holistic effect. Um,
Yeah,
so what,
it's also kind of about giving yourself permission to try new things and
yeah,
break the cycles, because we often live in these repetitive cycles that we just repeat and repeat and repeat. And when we behave this way, we have this thought, and then we feel dysphoric, and then it reinforces that same pattern of making ourselves small, or however it is we respond, or breathing shallow. And when you start learning to kind of zoom out from it and see it almost from above and go, okay, I can change this thought a little bit and I can change my behavior slightly, and that'll break the cycle and it'll give me permission to, by being kind to myself and seeing how maybe certain behaviors are not serving me, I can try something a little bit different and explore and see what feels more like me. And maybe you don't get it right immediately. Maybe you got to play around a little bit of different things. But, you know, even the experiences that don't feel quite right are still providing you with really useful information, because it's showing you where you don't want to go and it's helping to point you where you do want to go.
yeah, amazing. So what would be your intention when you work with people, regardless of what they're coming to you for? What's like the thing that you want to offer people in terms of their voice, in terms of their lives? Like what's the dream gift that you could give people through the work that you do?
Hmm. Sure, that is a tough question. to answer in a kind of a short way. I could be talking for a long time, but I think what I would like to be able to give them, is also what I like to do in this journey is empower people. So, for example, with the voice training, I want by the time we kind of wrap up the therapy, I want them to know, like almost be able to be their own therapist to a degree or their own coach to a degree where they understand what's going on in their bodies and how to manipulate certain aspects of the voice, like slightly change, like tune it a little bit here and there in a way that's safe and sustainable because the voice can be hurt. Um, so I really want to empower people with that kind of understanding and that skills, but also I want them to, and I guess it's not really a gift that I give them, it's a gift that they give themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about me, it's about them and them exploring who they are in a way that is kind and supportive, and yeah, just being able to be gentle with themselves really and give themselves permission to try new things, and when it doesn't work out, that's also okay. Things can't always work out and things can't always be perfect, and that's completely fine. That's really okay, I guess. Yeah, it's more about them giving themselves that permission to just play and explore and reconnect with kind of their inner child who could do that without judgment from themselves, and just sometimes mess up or just figure it out as you go, and that's okay.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, and really excited for your workshop. Oh, and before
Thank you.
I finish, actually, where can people find you online?
So my website is www.slspeechtherapy.com, and that also has my international coaching services there. You can book an appointment, including a free introductory session if you just want to meet me or ask me any questions and just feel like it's the right fit for you. Also, my links to my social media are also on my website. I mean, actually, sorry, I'm very bad of knowing them off the top of my head. But my coaching Instagram is the tag is underscore gender underscore voice coach underscore. um, and my speech therapy Instagram is SL underscore speech underscore therapy.
Cool. And we'll tag you in the bottom of this as well. Okay, thank you so much for your time. And
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
thank you.